The chapel bells hadn't rung in years, but they still cast shadows across the stone floor like iron bars. 11:47 p.m., and the coastal town of Positano smelled of salt and funeral flowers. My suitcase sat by my feet, held together with a belt because the latch had broken somewhere over the Atlantic. Inside, 3 dresses, a stolen passport photo of my father, and the last $340 I had in the world. Or rather, the last $340 my ex-fiancé hadn't managed to steal. "Signorina Skelley?" The priest's voice was soft, accented, patient. Father DeLuca, mid-70s, with kind eyes that had seen enough desperate women not to ask questions. He slid a single sheet of paper across the scarred wooden table. A marriage license, half in Italian, half in something that might have been Latin. I winced as I reached for the pen, my hand still trembling from the 10-hour journey. 48 hours ago, I'd been Margo Skelley, junior partner at Skelley & Associates Architecture, engaged, respected. Stupid enough to believe love and legal documents meant the same thing, now I was no one, in a country where I barely spoke the language, about to sign my name to a marriage that existed only to keep me from being deported. "He will be here soon," Father DeLuca said gently, glancing toward the chapel doors. "You are certain about this, Bambina?" I wasn't certain about anything anymore. Not since I'd walked into Daniel's office and found Elise, my best friend since freshman year, perched on his desk, wearing my grandmother's ring and his signature on the sale documents for my father's firm. But I nodded anyway. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the stained glass windows. I could hear the sea beyond the cliffs, furious and endless. Then, a sudden silence fell over the chapel. I hadn't heard a car, hadn't heard footsteps, but the air shifted, the way it does before a lightning strike, and I knew without turning that someone had entered. Father DeLuca straightened immediately, his expression transforming from gentle to reverent in a single breath. Even the candles seemed to still. "Don Genovesi," the priest murmured, bowing slightly. My stomach dropped. "Don, not Signor, not Mr. Don." He appeared at the edge of my vision first, a figure in a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it looked like a second skin, tall, composed. He moved with the kind of stillness that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew to step aside. Dark hair, rain-slicked. A face built from Renaissance marble. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes the color of smoke over deep water. He couldn't have been older than 35, but he carried himself like a man who'd lived a dozen lifetimes. I knew exactly who he was, even though I'd never seen him before. Everyone who worked in international architecture knew the Genovesi name. Officially, they were in real estate development and Mediterranean shipping. Unofficially, well, that was something people whispered about and never confirmed. My gaze dropped instinctively to the stone floor. Women like me didn't make eye contact with men like him. "Father," his voice was low, calm, laced with an accent that softened the edges of English. "Thank you for accommodating us at this hour. Of course, Don Genovesi, anything for your family." I heard the rustle of fabric as he moved closer. Expensive leather shoes against ancient stone. The faint scent of rain and something darker, sandalwood maybe, gun oil. "And this," the priest continued, his hand gesturing toward me, "is Miss Skelley." I forced myself to look up. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Not cold, not warm, just assessing. The way an art dealer might examine a painting he'd been hired to protect. "Miss Skelley," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like something precious and dangerous all at once. He extended a hand, no ring, no watch, but a black ink tattoo barely visible at his wrist, a lion's crest. I shook it. His palm was warm, his grip steady but not crushing. "Lucien D'Amato," he said. A lie. I knew it instantly, the way you know when a building's foundation is wrong just by looking at it. But I nodded and released his hand. He turned to Father DeLuca. "Shall we begin?" The priest gestured toward the altar where 2 candles flickered in the draft. No flowers, no music, no witnesses except the shadows. I picked up my suitcase. "Leave it," the man, Lucian, Publio, whoever he was, said quietly. "You won't need it anymore." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. We walked to the altar in silence. The storm outside intensified, rattling the old chapel like it was trying to get in. Or maybe like it was trying to warn me. Father DeLuca opened his missal, his voice taking on the formal rhythm of sacrament. "Dearly beloved!" I barely heard him. My heart was pounding too loudly. This was insane. I was marrying a stranger, a man whose real name I didn't even know, a man whose presence made a priest bow. "Do you, Margo Skelley, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I opened my mouth, closed it. The man beside me didn't move, didn't prompt, didn't pressure. He simply waited, as if he had all the time in the world, and my answer didn't matter either way. But his eyes, when I finally met them, weren't empty. They were sad. "I do," I whispered. Something flickered across his face. Relief? Regret? "And do you, Publio Genovesi?" My breath caught. "Publio, not Lucien. Take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" He didn't hesitate. "I do." His voice was quiet, but it filled the chapel like a vow that had been written centuries ago and was only now being spoken aloud. Father DeLuca smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." He closed the book. "You may kiss the bride." Publio turned to me slowly, and for a brief, dizzying moment I thought he might actually, but he didn't. Instead, he took my left hand, brought it to his lips, and pressed a single, deliberate kiss to my knuckles. "Benvenuta a casa, Margo," he murmured. "Welcome home." Thunder cracked directly overhead, and the lights went out. In the sudden darkness, I felt his hand tighten around mine, protective, possessive, unshakable. "Come," he said quietly, his breath warm against my temple. "It's time to go." I didn't ask where home was. I didn't ask why a man like him needed a wife he'd never met. I didn't ask what kind of debt my father, a man who died 3 years ago in a car accident that was ruled entirely normal, could possibly owe to a family like the Genoveses. Because 2 days earlier, I'd been someone else. Someone who asked questions and demanded answers and believed the world made sense. That woman died the moment Daniel handed me the sale documents with Elise's signature next to his. The woman who walked out of that chapel, her hand wrapped in a stranger's grip, was someone new. Someone who'd learned that safety was a lie, and that sometimes the only way to survive betrayal was to marry the most dangerous man you'd ever met. Subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow's story unfolds darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than you think. Now, let's begin the tale. The SUV waiting outside the chapel was the kind of vehicle that didn't have a price tag, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Black. Armored, probably. Windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside until the door opened, and a man built like a stone fortress stepped out, holding an umbrella. He didn't speak, just nodded at Publio and opened the rear door. Publio's hand was still wrapped around mine. Not pulling, not forcing, just present. A silent question. Will you come willingly, or will I have to make this difficult? I climbed in. The interior smelled of leather and something expensive. Bergamot, maybe. The seats were heated. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Mozart, I thought. Or Vivaldi. My father would have known. Publio slid in beside me, and the door closed with the heavy thunk of reinforced steel. We pulled away from the chapel, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I watched the dark coastline blur past, the sea invisible beyond the cliffs except when lightning illuminated it, wild, churning, indifferent to the chaos of human lives. "You're cold," Publio said quietly. I was. My dress, a simple navy sheath I'd bought at a Rome airport kiosk, was still damp. I hadn't had time to change, hadn't had time to think. Before I could respond, he shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. The weight of it was immediate, warm. The lining still held his body heat. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, then turned his attention to the window. The silence stretched. I should have been terrified. I should have been planning an escape. I should have demanded answers. "Who are you really? What do you want from me? Why did the priest call you Dawn?" But I was too numb. Numb the way you are after a bone breaks, after the shock sets in, after your brain decides that processing more pain isn't worth the effort. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window. Hollow eyes, hair still damp and tangled. A stranger wearing a dead woman's face. Margo Skelley, the girl who was going to build cathedrals. Margo Skelley, who believed in blueprints and foundations and things that could be measured. Margo Skelley, who was stupid enough to think love was a load-bearing wall. I'd brought coffee. That was the detail I'd remember later, the specific, idiotic detail that would loop in my mind like a broken recording. 2 lattes from the corner cafe. One with oat milk for Daniel, because he'd gone vegan in March and hadn't shut up about it since. I'd been smiling when I pushed open the office door. Skelley and Associates, my father's firm, my name on the door, my legacy. Except the nameplate had already been removed. I should have noticed that first. But I didn't, because I was too busy noticing Elise. My best friend since freshman year, maid of honor at the wedding we'd been planning for 18 months. The woman who'd held my hand at my father's funeral and promised me I'd never be alone. She was sitting on Daniel's desk, wearing my grandmother's engagement ring. The coffee cups slipped from my hands. I didn't hear them hit the floor, didn't feel the hot liquid splash across my shoes. "Margo." Daniel stood, smoothing his tie, that tie, the one I'd given him for his 30th birthday. "We need to talk." Elise didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She just smiled. "I know this is a shock," Daniel continued, his voice taking on that calm, rational tone he used with difficult clients. "But Elise and we didn't plan this. It just happened." "How long?" My voice didn't sound like mine. "Does it matter?" Elise finally spoke, examining her nails. Painted red, I noticed. She never wore red. I wore red. "You were always going to find out eventually." "How long?" Daniel sighed, like I was being unreasonable. 8 months. 8 months. We'd been engaged for 2 years. "And the firm?" I heard myself ask, even though I already knew. "The sale finalized yesterday," Daniel said. "Harrington Group made an excellent offer. well above market value. You can't sell. It's my father's. It's mine, he corrected gently. Legally. You put me on the title when we got engaged, remember? You said you trusted me. I had. God help me, I had. The money's already been transferred, Elise added, twisting the ring on her finger. We're using it for the wedding. Well, and the honeymoon. We were thinking Bali. The room tilted. You can keep your personal things, Daniel said, gesturing to the small bookshelf by the window. My father's drafting compass, his first architectural award, the photo of us at my college graduation. We'll have them shipped wherever you end up. Wherever I... The apartment's in my name too, he said. I'll need you out by the end of the week. Elise hopped off the desk, smoothing her skirt. Don't be dramatic, Margo. You'll land on your feet. You always do. She walked past me, trailing perfume. My perfume, I realized. The bottle I'd left at Daniel's. She paused at the door. Oh, and for what it's worth? She glanced back, her smile sharp as broken glass. He was never really yours. You were just convenient. Until you weren't. The door closed. I stood there, in my father's office that was no longer my father's office, staring at the man I'd loved, who was looking at me like I was a problem to be solved. I'll have my lawyer send over the paperwork, Daniel said, for the dissolution of the partnership and the engagement. It'll be cleaner if you don't contest it. Cleaner, I repeated. Margo. He actually sounded sorry. You're a good architect. You'll find another job. Maybe even start your own firm someday. This doesn't have to ruin you. But it already had. We're here. Publio's voice pulled me back to the present. I blinked, disoriented. The car had stopped. Through the rain-streaked window, I could make out massive iron gates slowly swinging open. Beyond them, a long driveway lined with cypress trees, their silhouettes black against the storm-lit sky. And at the end, a villa. No, a palazzo. 3 stories of pale stone and arched windows, perched on the cliffs like it had grown there. Lights glowed warm behind shutters. A fountain, silent now, dominated the circular courtyard. It looked like something from a film. Old money, old power, old secrets buried in the foundation. This is your home? I whispered. Our home, Publio corrected quietly. As of tonight. The car rolled to a stop beneath a covered portico. The stone fortress man opened the door. Rain drummed against the awning above us. Publio stepped out first, then turned, offering his hand. I took it. My legs were unsteady as I stood, from exhaustion, from shock, from the dawning realization that I'd just traded one cage for another. Except this cage had armed guards and a man who commanded priests with his presence alone. The front door opened before we reached it. A woman stood in the entrance, 60s, elegant, dressed in black slacks and a cream silk blouse. Her silver hair was swept into a low chignon. Her eyes, the same smoky color as Publio's, assessed me in a single glance. Zia. Francesca, Publio said, his hand settling at the small of my back. This is Margo, my wife. The word hung in the air between us. Wife. Francesca's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Concern? Then she smiled. Warm, genuine, unexpected. Benvenuta, cara, she said, stepping aside. You look half drowned. Come. Let's get you warm and fed. The entrance hall was all marble and frescoed ceilings. A chandelier, Murano glass, probably 18th century, cast soft light across oil paintings in gilded frames. A staircase curved upward into shadow. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was nothing like the IKEA-furnished apartment I'd shared with Daniel. "I've prepared the east wing," Francesca said to Publio, not to me. "Your rooms are ready." "Your rooms?" Plural. Relief and something else, disappointment, twisted in my chest. Publio nodded. "Thank you." He turned to me. "You should rest. We'll talk in the morning." He was already walking away toward a corridor that disappeared into the west wing. "Wait," I called out. He stopped. Didn't turn. "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why did you marry me?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then quietly, almost too quiet to hear over the rain, "Because I made a promise to a good man, and I keep my promises, Margo, even when they cost me." He disappeared into the shadows. I stood there dripping rainwater onto marble that probably cost more than my entire education, wearing a stranger's jacket that smelled like sandalwood and gunpowder. Francesca touched my elbow gently. "Come, bambina. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow?" She smiled, sad and knowing. "Tomorrow you learn what it means to be a Genovesi." I followed her up the stairs, each step taking me further from the woman I'd been and closer to whatever I was becoming. I dreamed of blueprints burning, of Daniel's signature in red ink, Elise's laughter echoing through empty rooms, my father's office stripped bare. When I woke, the sun was streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows I didn't recognize, in a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds, in a room 3 times the size of my old apartment, and on the nightstand, next to a glass of water and a single white rose, my father's compass. The brass was tarnished exactly how I remembered, the glass face slightly cracked on the left side from when I'd dropped it at age 12. His initials engraved on the back, J.S., Joseph Skelley. I sat up slowly, my heart hammering. This was impossible. Daniel had sold everything, the furniture, the files, the awards. I'd watched the estate liquidators carry boxes out of the office. I'd begged them to let me keep just one thing, and they'd refused. "Inventory already logged, miss. Sorry." So how was it here? How did Publio, a man I'd met 12 hours ago, have my father's compass in his possession? I picked it up with shaking hands. The weight of it felt like memory made solid, my father teaching me to read blueprints. Architecture isn't about buildings, Margo. It's about knowing where you're going and how to get there. Always know your true north. A soft knock at the door made me jump. "Kara? Are you awake?" Francesca's voice, warm and melodic. I set the compass down quickly, like I'd been caught stealing. "Yes. Come in." She entered carrying a tray, espresso, warm bread, fresh figs, honey. The scent alone made my stomach clench with hunger. I hadn't eaten since... when? Rome? The airport? "I thought you might prefer breakfast in your room this morning," she said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "Adjusting to a new home can be overwhelming." Home. The word felt foreign. "Thank you," I managed. She smiled, settling into the chair across from me with the ease of someone who belonged everywhere she went. "Did you sleep well?" Yes. A lie. "The room is beautiful." And it was. All pale blues and creams, sheer curtains that billowed in the sea breeze, antique furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. The bed alone probably cost more than a year's rent. Francesca's gaze drifted to the compass on the nightstand. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, perhaps. Or sorrow. "That was your father's, yes?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Publio asked me to return it to you. He thought you might want it close. How does he have it?" She poured the espresso with practiced grace. "There are many things my nephew has, Kara, most of them acquired through patience and, let us say, strategic investment." That wasn't an answer. I wrapped my hands around the small cup, letting the warmth ground me. "Where is he? Publio?" "Working." She gestured vaguely toward the west wing. "He has meetings most mornings. Business that requires his attention." "What kind of business?" Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "The kind that keeps families like ours alive. Bambina. Families like ours." I wasn't part of any family. I was a transaction. A debt repaid. Francesca stood smoothing her linen trousers. "When you're ready, I'll show you the house. And I've taken the liberty of having a few things brought in for you." She nodded toward the closet. "You arrived with so little." After she left, I opened the closet door and froze. Inside, a dozen dresses, all my size. Casual clothes, linen pants, silk blouses, cotton sundresses. Evening wear in rich jewel tones. Shoes lined up perfectly on the shelf, from sandals to heels. All of it tailored exactly to my measurements. I pulled out a dress at random, held it up. The length was perfect. The cut designed for my frame. Narrow shoulders, longer torso. How? I'd been in Italy less than a week. We'd been married less than a day, which meant this had been planned, which meant Publio had known, long before I walked into that chapel, that I would say yes. My skin prickled. I dressed quickly, simple cream pants, navy blouse, and stepped into the hallway. The villa in daylight was even more stunning than I'd realized. Vaulted ceilings with restored frescoes, marble floors inlaid with intricate patterns, windows that overlooked terraced gardens cascading down toward the cliffs, the Mediterranean glittering beyond like hammered silver. Beautiful and silent. Too silent. I wandered through corridors lined with oil paintings, Renaissance era unless I missed my guess, landscapes, portraits of stern-looking men in dark clothes, one painting of a woman holding a white rose, her expression fierce and sad. A title plaque beneath, Caterina Genovesi, 1892. Genovesi, not D'Amato. I stopped at a window overlooking the courtyard. Below, two men in dark suits stood by the fountain, speaking quietly. One of them wore an earpiece, the other had a gun visible beneath his jacket. Not guards, not exactly, more like sentries. I moved to another hallway, testing a door. Locked. Another. Locked. A third. This one opened. Into a library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather chairs, a desk positioned to face the sea. And voices drifting from somewhere deeper in the house. Publio's voice. Low. Commanding. Speaking rapid Italian. I stepped closer to the corridor following the sound. Non mi interessa quello che pensa Varenzio. Se attraversa di nuovo il confine, lo seppellirò lui stesso. I don't care what Varenzio thinks. If he crosses the border again, I'll bury him myself. A pause. Another man's voice, older, cautious. Don Genovesi, con rispetto, la ragazza. È un rischio. Don Genovesi, with respect. The girl. She's a risk. My breath caught. La ragazza. The girl. Me. Lei non è un rischio. Publio said quietly. È sotto la mia protezione. Chiunque la tocchi risponderà a me. She's not a risk. She's under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Footsteps approached. I turned and walked quickly back toward the library, my heart racing, and nearly collided with a man in a black suit. He was younger than Publio, maybe 30, with sharp features and eyes that assessed me the way you'd assess a structural weakness. Mrs. Genovesi, he said in accented English. A statement, not a question. I was just... Lost? A faint smile. The house is easy to lose yourself in. I'm Luca, head of security. Security. Right. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the garden, he suggested. Or your room. The East Wing is safer for you. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a boundary. I nodded and retreated, feeling his eyes on my back until I turned the corner. You're paranoid, Margo. Daniel's voice, amused and patronizing, when I'd asked why he needed my signature on the title change. We're getting married. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. That's how partnerships work. Elise had nodded, pouring more wine. He's right, babe. You need to learn to trust people. Not everyone's out to screw you over. I'd signed. Because I'd trusted? Because I'd thought love meant the same thing as safety. Because I'd been so stupid. I spent the afternoon in my room, sketching. Old habit. When the world felt chaotic, I drew. Buildings that would never be built. Bridges to nowhere. Structures with perfect foundations and impossible angles. The sun sank lower, painting the sea gold and crimson. Francesca brought dinner on a tray, pasta, grilled fish, wine I didn't touch. He'll be late again tonight, she said gently. Don't wait up. But I couldn't sleep. I lay in the enormous bed, listening to the house settle around me, the distant sound of the sea, footsteps in far corridors, doors opening and closing. At some point I heard a car in the courtyard. Voices. Then silence. I must have dozed, because when I opened my eyes again, the room was dark except for moonlight, and Publio was standing in my doorway. I gasped, sitting up. He was soaked through. His white shirt clung to his chest, translucent with rain. His dark hair dripped water onto the marble floor. He looked exhausted. Dangerous. And he was staring at me like he'd forgotten I existed and just now remembered. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to wake you. He stopped. I wanted to make sure you were here. Where else would I be? A ghost of a smile. Fair point. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Not all the way. Just enough for privacy. I should have been afraid. I should have demanded he leave. But there was something in his eyes, something raw and unguarded that kept me still. You're trembling, he said. I was. I hadn't noticed. He crossed to the window seat, keeping distance between us, and sat heavily. From this angle, I could see the tattoo on his left wrist more clearly now, a lion's head rendered in stark black ink, crowned, fierce, the Genovesi crest. I'd seen it on the gates, on the letterhead of papers Francesca had left in the study. You can sleep without fear here, Publio said quietly, his gaze fixed on the sea beyond the window. No one will hurt you within these walls. But... He looked at me then, and his eyes were smoke and shadow. But fear is a wise companion in my house, Margo. It keeps you careful. It keeps you alive. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to be honest. He stood, moving toward the door. You're safe here, but safety and peace are not the same thing. Publio. He paused, his hand on the door frame. Why did you really marry me? For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, so quietly, I almost missed it. Because your father once saved my brother's life, and because... He stopped. Because when I saw what they'd done to you, what they'd taken, I couldn't stand aside. Not again. Again. But he was already gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. I stared at the space where he'd been, my heart pounding. Not again. What did that mean? I lay back down, pulling the covers up, but I didn't sleep. Because somewhere in this house of marble and secrets, a man who commanded fear like other men commanded armies had just admitted he'd married me not out of duty, but because he couldn't bear to watch me fall, and I didn't know if that made me safer or in far more danger than I'd ever imagined. The notification came while I was drinking coffee on the terrace. My old phone, the one I'd kept charged out of habit, even though there was no one left to call, buzzed against the wrought iron table. A news alert. Skelley & Associates rebrands as Harrington Cross Architecture. New vision for a legacy firm. My hand froze halfway to my mouth. The photo loaded slowly. Daniel in a charcoal suit, Elise beside him in cream silk, both of them standing in front of my father's building. Except the sign above the door had been changed. Skelley erased, replaced. The article called them dynamic young partners bringing fresh energy to a storied New York firm. My father's firm, 40 years of work, hundreds of projects, buildings that still stood across 3 continents, reduced to a footnote. Founded in 1985 by the late Joseph Skelley, the firm has undergone recent leadership changes. Leadership changes. Like I'd never existed. Like my name had never been on that door. I set the phone down carefully, afraid that if I gripped it any harder, it would shatter. Bad news? I jumped. Publio stood in the terrace doorway, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair was still damp from a shower. He held an espresso cup in one hand, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, tracking every micro-expression on my face. I didn't hear you, I said. I know. He moved to the table, pulling out the chair across from me. You were somewhere else. He sat with the kind of economy of movement that suggested military training, or something worse. His gaze flicked to my phone, then back to my face. He didn't ask to see it. Didn't need to. They launched, I said quietly. The company, under new management. Harrington Cross? My stomach dropped. How did you... I make it my business to know things, Margo. He sipped his espresso, watching me over the rim. Especially things that concern my wife. My wife. He said it so easily, like we'd been married for years instead of days. They erased me, I whispered, like I was never there. Publio set down his cup. They took your work, not your talent. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. His voice was quiet but certain. What you built can't be unsigned. Every building your father designed still stands. Every project you contributed to still exists. Changing a name on a door doesn't change what's real. I wanted to believe him. But belief required trust, and I'd spent the last 72 hours learning that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. Francesca appeared with a tray, fresh fruit, pastries, more coffee. She set it down with a knowing glance at Publio, then disappeared back inside. We ate in silence for a moment. I watched him. Really watched him. The way his eyes tracked the gardener moving through the olive grove below. The way his attention shifted when a car engine sounded in the distance. How his posture changed, barely perceptibly, when Luca appeared at the terrace entrance, gave a short nod, then left. He was reading the environment constantly, calculating, assessing, like a man who expected violence and was always 3 moves ahead of it. Why did you agree to marry me? His question caught me off guard. I looked up. He was leaning back in his chair now, completely still, his expression unreadable. You don't know me, he continued. You knew nothing about me except that a priest vouched for me and I offered you a way out. Yet you said yes within minutes. Does it matter? It does to me. I set down my fork. You want the truth? Always. Because I didn't trust myself anymore. The words came out harder than I intended. I thought I was smart. I thought I could read people. I built my entire life on foundations I believed were solid, and it turned out they were made of sand." Publio's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, maybe. "So when you offered me a way out," I continued, "I took it, because clearly my judgment was worthless. I figured a stranger's promise couldn't be worse than the people who claimed to love me." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, and looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Then trust me until you can again." "Trust you?" I almost laughed. "I don't even know who you are." "Yes, you do." His voice was low, certain. "You know I keep my promises. You know I haven't lied to you. You know that everyone in this house would die before letting harm come to you. Because of a debt to my father. Because you're mine now." He said it simply, matter of fact. "And I protect what's mine." The weight of those words settled over me like a shroud. Before I could respond, he stood. "I have meetings this afternoon. Luca will be nearby if you need anything. Stay within the villa grounds." "Is that an order?" A faint smile touched his lips. "A suggestion. For your safety." "And if I don't take suggestions well?" "Then we'll have a different conversation." He buttoned his cuff, the motion revealing the lion tattoo again. "But I'd prefer not to have it." He left before I could answer. By nightfall, the house had taken on a different quality. Darker, quieter. I'd spent the afternoon in the library, trying to distract myself with books I couldn't focus on. Francesca had brought lunch, then disappeared for errands in town. The guards changed shifts at 6. I'd watched from the window as 4 men replaced 4 others, the exchange wordless and efficient. At 9, I heard cars in the courtyard, voices in the west wing. I should have stayed in my room, should have pretended I didn't hear anything. But 3 days of questions and half-answers had worn my patience thin. I moved through the corridors in bare feet, following the sound. Publio's study. The door was cracked open, light spilling into the hallway. I pressed myself against the wall, listening. 3 shipments delayed. A man's voice, rough and irritated. "Verenzio's people are interfering at the ports again." "How many times?" Publio, calm, cold. "Twice this month. And they hit one of our warehouses in Salerno last week. Casualties? 2 injured, 1 critical." A pause. I could picture Publio's expression, that terrible stillness that meant he was calculating violence. "Verenzio thinks the truce makes him untouchable," another voice said. "Luca," I realized. "He's testing boundaries. Then we remind him where the boundaries are." Publio's voice was soft, lethal. "Send a message to his lieutenant, the one who runs the port operations. Make it clear that the next interference will be the last." "How clear?" "Use your imagination, but keep it clean. I don't want police involvement." "See, Don Genovesi." Footsteps moved toward the door. I turned to run, and my hand caught the edge of a side table. A vase wobbled, fell, crashed against marble. The sound exploded through the silence like a gunshot. Everything stopped. "Margo." Publio's voice, not a question. I froze, my heart hammering. He appeared in the doorway, backlit by the study's warm light. Behind him, I could see 3 men standing around a desk covered in papers and what looked like shipping manifests. His expression was unreadable. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, not looking away from me, "we'll continue this tomorrow." The men filed out past me, their faces carefully blank. Luca was the last to leave. He paused, gave me a look that might have been sympathy or warning, then disappeared down the corridor. Publio stepped into the hallway, closing the study door behind him. We stood there in the half-darkness, the broken vase between us like evidence of a crime. I started, listening. He moved closer, not threatening, but I felt the air shift around him. I know. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. He stopped an arm's length away. You're curious. You want to understand what world you've married into. That's natural. Then why do I feel like I'm in trouble? Because you are. His voice was soft, gentle almost, which somehow made it worse. Not with me, but with the knowledge you're collecting. He reached down, picking up a shard of broken porcelain, turned it over in his fingers. Curiosity can be dangerous currency in my world, Margo, he said quietly. Information is leverage. Leverage makes you a target. I'm already a target. You said so yourself. The girl who's a risk. His eyes snapped to mine. You heard that. I hear a lot of things in this house. Clearly. He set the shard down on the table. Which is why we're going to have rules. Rules. For your safety. He took a breath. You don't leave the grounds without me or Luca. You don't ask the guards questions. And you don't listen at doors, because what you hear might get you killed if the wrong person knows you heard it. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected. An edge crept into his voice. There's a difference. Is there? I threw his words back at him. Something dangerous flickered across his face. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not a warm smile, a wolf's smile. You have more spine than I gave you credit for, he murmured. That's good. You'll need it. He turned and walked back toward his study. Publio. He paused but didn't turn. What's the Verenzio problem? For a heartbeat, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, a man who doesn't know when to stop pushing. And a reckoning that's been a long time coming. The study door closed. I stood alone in the hallway, surrounded by broken porcelain and the echo of words I didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear. I'd married a man who spoke of violence the way other men spoke of weather. And somewhere in this house of marble and secrets, a storm was building. I just didn't know yet if I was sheltered from it, or standing directly in its path. The clock on the mantel read 2:47 a.m. when I heard the car. I'd been lying awake for hours, watching shadows move across the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. Sleep felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, Elise's smile, the nameplate being removed from my father's door, Harrington Cross architecture, like we'd never existed. The car door slammed, voices low and urgent, then footsteps, uneven, heavier than usual, on the marble stairs. I sat up. Something was wrong. I should have stayed in bed. Should have pulled the covers over my head and pretended I heard nothing. But I was already moving, pulling on the silk robe Francesca had left hanging in the closet, stepping into the hallway. The west wing was dark except for a single light spilling from beneath Publio's door. More voices. Luca's, tight with concern. Need a doctor? No. Publio's voice, strained. No doctors. Just get the kit. I'll handle it. Don Genovesi. Vatten. Go. A pause. Then footsteps retreating down the hall. I moved closer, my bare feet silent on cold marble. The door was cracked open. Through the gap, I could see Publio standing at his bathroom sink, one hand braced against the counter, the other pressed to his temple. His white shirt was torn at the shoulder, stained dark with blood. His jacket lay discarded on the floor. He was alone. I knocked softly. He went absolutely still. Francesca, I said I'm fine. It's not Francesca. A beat of silence. Margo. Not a question. A warning. Go back to bed. You're hurt. It's nothing. You're bleeding. I've bled. Before. He didn't turn around. Go, please. But I was already pushing the door open. His room was larger than mine, all dark wood and leather, windows facing the sea, masculine, sparse, everything in its place except for the trail of blood drops leading from the door to the bathroom. Publio met my eyes in the mirror. His face was pale beneath the blood, his jaw tight. The cut above his temple was deep, still bleeding. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Probably not. I moved to the sink beside him. But I am. Up close, I could see the damage. A gash maybe 2 inches long, jagged at the edges. Something blunt, not a blade. His knuckles were split and bruising. Whatever had happened, he'd fought back. Sit down, I said. Margo, sit. Down. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Then, surprising me, he did. Lowering himself onto the edge of the bathtub with a controlled exhale that told me there were other injuries he wasn't showing. I found the first aid kit in the cabinet, professional grade, military surplus, gauze, antiseptic, butterfly closures, suture thread. Of course he had suture thread. I dampened a clean cloth and knelt in front of him. This will hurt, I warned. It already does. I pressed the cloth to his temple, cleaning away the blood. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just watched me with those smoke-gray eyes, his expression unreadable. My hands were steadier than I expected. My father used to say I had surgeon's hands. Precise, careful. It's why I'd been good at drafting, at translating vision into detail. I worked in silence, cleaning the wound, checking for debris. The cut was clean enough. It wouldn't need stitches if I could close it properly. What happened? I asked quietly. Business discussion that got heated. This is heated? I gestured to his temple. What does cold look like? A ghost of a smile. You don't want to know. I opened an antiseptic wipe. This will sting. I'm aware. I pressed it to the wound. His jaw tightened, but he didn't pull away. My father used to patch me up, I said, focusing on the work. When I was little, I was always falling out of trees, scraping knees, breaking things. I reached for the butterfly closures. He was so gentle, so patient. He'd tell me stories while he worked so I wouldn't focus on the pain. What kind of stories? Buildings, mostly. The Duomo in Florence. Sagrada Familia. He'd describe every detail until I could see them. I carefully applied the first closure, pulling the edges of the wound together. He said architecture was about creating spaces where people could feel safe, protected. Publio's expression changed. Something shifted behind his eyes. Joseph understood that better than most. I froze. My father's name. In his voice. What did you say? Publio closed his eyes briefly, and I realized he hadn't meant to say it out loud. How do you know my father's name? My hands had stopped moving. You said he built something for your family, but Margo, how did you know him? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up, gently taking my wrist, stopping my hands. Your father once built something for my family, he said quietly. Something that saved lives. You said that before. What did he build? A house? Safe houses. Publio's voice was soft, careful. 3 of them, in different cities. Places where people could disappear where they needed to. Hidden rooms, secondary exits, structural elements that looked decorative but served defensive purposes. The world tilted. That's impossible. My father designed museums, libraries. He didn't. He did both. Publio's thumb brushed against my pulse point. I didn't think he realized he was doing it. 20 years ago, my family needed help. We were at war with another organization. People were dying. We needed places the police couldn't find, that our enemies couldn't breach. I pulled my hand away, standing. My father wouldn't. Your father was a good man who helped people when they had nowhere else to turn. Publio stood too, facing me. He didn't ask questions, didn't judge. He just built what we needed, and because of that, people lived who would have died. My mind was racing, trying to reconcile the man who taught me about load-bearing walls and the golden ratio with someone who designed hideouts for the Mafia. One of those safe houses, Publio continued quietly, saved my younger brother's life. 15 years ago, there was a raid. Police, federal agents. Marco was there with 2 others. They would have been arrested, or worse. He moved to the window looking out at the Black Sea. Your father had built an escape route, a false wall that led to a tunnel system. They made it out, all of them. He glanced back at me. When Marco called to tell me what happened, he said, "The architect saved us." I asked your father's name. I never forgot it. So you... I couldn't finish the sentence. I swore a debt. He turned fully now, his gaze intense. Your father asked for nothing in return, said he was just doing what was right. But in my world, Margo, debts like that don't disappear. They carry weight. They demand repayment. And when you found out what happened to me, I repaid it the only way I knew how. His voice dropped. By giving you my name, my protection, everything I could offer to keep you safe when the people who should have protected you destroyed you instead. The room felt too small suddenly, too warm. You married me because of a promise to a dead man. I married you because I owed your father everything. He took a step closer. But I'm keeping you because... He stopped. Because what? For the first time since I'd met him, Publio looked uncertain, vulnerable. Because you remind me that there are still people in this world worth protecting, he said finally. Worth saving. The weight of his words settled between us. This wasn't a marriage of convenience anymore. This was a debt repaid, a promise kept, a connection forged decades ago by a good man who'd built secret rooms and asked no questions. My father had saved his brother, and now Publio was trying to save me. The compass, I whispered, on my nightstand. You had it because I've been tracking what happened to your father's estate for months, Publio admitted. When I learned what your fiancé had done, I started acquiring pieces, the compass, some of his blueprints, a few personal items that were auctioned off. Why? Because they're yours. He said it simply. And what's yours should never have been taken. I should have been angry, should have felt manipulated. But all I felt was a strange, overwhelming sense of being seen. This man, this dangerous, complicated man, had been protecting me before I ever knew he existed. You should rest, I said quietly, my voice unsteady. The wound is closed, but you need sleep. He nodded slowly. I moved toward the door, then paused. Thank you, I said, for telling me. Margo. I turned back. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Something raw. Something real. Your father was right, he said softly. Architecture is about creating spaces where people feel safe. You're safe here. I promise you that. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left. But I didn't go back to my room. I stood in the hallway for a long time, my back against the cool marble wall, my heart racing. Through the cracked door, I could see Publio move slowly to his bed. He sat on the edge, his shoulders bowed with exhaustion, one hand still pressed to his temple. Then he lay back, fully clothed, and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out. Sleep, or something close to it. I watched him through the gap in the door, this man who commanded fear and violence with equal ease. This man who'd married me to honor a debt to a father I'd loved and lost, half in awe, half afraid, because I was beginning to understand something terrifying. Publio Genovesi wasn't just keeping a promise. He was keeping me, and I wasn't sure anymore if I wanted to escape, or if I wanted to stay. The invitation came at breakfast 3 days later. Publio appeared on the terrace where I'd been sketching architectural studies of the villa's chapel, trying to understand the Renaissance-era structural elements. He was dressed for business, navy suit, crisp white shirt, no tie yet. The cut on his temple had healed to a thin red line. He'd refused to let me check it again. "I need you to come with me tomorrow night," he said without preamble. I looked up from my drawing. "Where?" "Naples. A charity gala." He poured himself espresso from the carafe Francesca had left. "The Campagna Arts Foundation. They raise money for historic preservation." "That sounds normal." "It's not." He sat across from me, his expression serious. "It's a performance. Old families showing strength, alliances on display, rivalries pretending to be civilized. And you want me there because you're my wife." He said it simply, and it's time people knew that. Something fluttered in my chest. Fear or anticipation, I couldn't tell. "I don't have anything to wear to something like that." The corner of his mouth lifted. "You will." The next afternoon, Francesca appeared at my door with 3 women carrying garment bags and equipment cases. "Cara," she said, eyes bright with excitement, "it's time to make you unforgettable." What followed was 2 hours of transformation. The gown they brought was midnight blue, so dark it was almost black, with a neckline that skimmed my collarbones and a back that plunged to my waist. Silk that moved like water, elegant, dangerous. Shoes that added 3 inches to my height. Hair swept up in a style that looked effortless, but took 45 minutes to create. Makeup that made my eyes look larger, my cheekbones sharper. When I finally looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who belonged in Publio's world. "Perfetta," Francesca breathed. "He won't be able to look away." A knock at the door. Francesca opened it, and Publio stepped inside. He was in a tuxedo, perfectly tailored, black on black, his hair swept back, a watch that probably cost more than a car visible at his wrist. But he stopped when he saw me. Just stopped. His expression didn't change much, a slight widening of his eyes, his lips parting almost imperceptibly, but the air between us shifted. "You look—" He stopped, started again. "You're beautiful." Heat crept up my neck. "Thank you." He moved closer, pulling something from his pocket. A velvet box. Inside, a necklace. Diamonds and sapphires in an antique setting, the kind of piece that belonged in a vault. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. I thought, "If you're willing." I turned, lifting my hair. His fingers were warm against my neck as he fastened the clasp. They lingered a moment longer than necessary. "There's one more thing," he said. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small blade, slim, elegant, deadly. Maybe 4 inches long with an ornate handle. "You don't have to carry it," he said, "but I'd feel better if you did." I took it. The weight was surprisingly light. "Where?" He indicated a discreet pocket in his jacket lining. "Or your clutch." whichever you prefer. I slipped it into the beaded evening bag Francesca had provided. A knife at a charity gala. This was my life now. The drive to Naples took 40 minutes. We didn't speak much. Publio spent most of it on his phone, speaking rapid Italian with Luca about security arrangements. But his free hand rested on the seat between us, close enough that I could feel its heat. When we finally pulled up to the venue, a restored palazzo lit with golden light, there were photographers. Actual photographers. Ignore them, Publio said quietly as the car stopped. Look at me, not the cameras. I'll handle the rest. The door opened. He stepped out first, then turned, offering his hand. I took it. Flashbulbs exploded. Publio's hand settled at the small of my back, proprietary and protective, as we climbed the stairs. I could feel the warmth of his palm through the thin silk. Inside, the palazzo was breathtaking. Frescoed ceilings, crystal chandeliers, rooms filled with people in evening wear holding champagne glasses and wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Everyone watched us enter. Not him. Us. A distinguished older man approached. Silver hair, expensive tuxedo, eyes like a shark. Don Genovesi, he said warmly. Too warmly. What a surprise to see you here. Salvatore. Publio's tone was cordial but cool. Allow me to introduce my wife, Margo Genovesi. My wife, said out loud. In public, in front of witnesses. The older man's eyebrows rose fractionally. I hadn't heard you'd married. Congratulations. It was a private ceremony, Publio said smoothly. Family only. We moved through the crowd, and it was like watching water part. People stepped aside, nodded respectfully, whispered the moment we passed. Publio introduced me again and again. My wife, Margo. Each time, his hand never left my back. Each time, I felt more like I belonged to him. And the terrifying part was, I didn't hate it. We were examining a Renaissance painting when I felt Publio tense beside me. A man was approaching. Younger than most here, maybe 40. Handsome in a cold way, like a knife blade. His smile was predatory. Genovesi, he said. I heard rumors you'd brought someone. How domestic of you. Publio's hand tightened almost imperceptibly at my waist. Verenzio. So this was him. The problem? The threat. Verenzio's eyes slid to me, assessing. Dismissive. The new Mrs. Genovesi, he said, his tone mocking. Tell me, Akara, did he explain what your husband actually does? Or are you the type who doesn't ask questions? I'm the type who knows when someone's trying to provoke a reaction, I said evenly. And I'm not interested in giving you one. Something dangerous flashed in Verenzio's eyes, but Publio laughed. A low, genuinely amused sound. Careful, Verenzio, he said softly. My wife has more spine than you give her credit for, and considerably better judgment than to engage with men who mistake rudeness for power. Verenzio's smile froze. Enjoy the evening, Publio continued, his voice dropping to something lethal. While you still can. He guided me away, his hand now fully around my waist, possessive and tense. I could feel the violence radiating off him in waves. Publio, I whispered. Your hand. I glanced down. His other hand was clenched in a fist so tight his knuckles were white. He saw me looking and deliberately relaxed his fingers. I'm fine, he said. You wanted to hit him. I wanted to kill him. He said it conversationally, but that would have been poor form at a charity event. He said it like a joke, but his eyes were still dark with rage. We stayed another hour, making appearances, accepting congratulations, playing the part of a couple who belonged together. And the strange thing was, it didn't feel like playing. When his hand settled at my back, I leaned into it. When he bent to murmur something in my ear, I felt my breath catch. When he introduced me as his wife, I felt a flicker of pride. This dangerous, complicated man had chosen to protect me, had given me his name, was looking at me now like I was something precious and worth defending. The car ride back was quiet. Publio had removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. The lion tattoo was visible in the passing streetlights. He was staring out the window, his jaw still tight. "Who are you, Publio?" I whispered. He turned, his expression unreadable. "What?" "You move between worlds like you were born to it. Charity galas and violence, protection and threat. You quote Renaissance art and talk about killing people in the same breath." I shook my head. "Who are you?" For a long moment he was silent. Then, "The man your father warned me I would become." The pain in his voice was unexpected. "What does that mean?" "When Joseph built those safe houses, he saw what I was." Publio's voice was low. "What my family was, the life I'd inherit. And one night, over grappa, he told me, 'You're a good boy, Publio. Don't let this world take that from you.'" He looked at me then, and his eyes were full of something raw. "I tried," he said. "For years I tried, but my world doesn't let you be good. It only lets you survive." "I don't think that's true." "You don't know me well enough yet." "Then tell me." I shifted closer. "Help me understand." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his hand cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. "You're the first truly good thing in my life in a decade," he said quietly. "And I'm terrified I'll ruin you just by keeping you close." "I'm already ruined," I whispered. "They ruined me before you ever found me." "No." His voice was fierce. "You're wounded, not ruined. There's a difference." The car slowed. We were approaching the villa, but neither of us moved. His thumb traced my jaw. My hand rose to cover his. "Margo," he breathed. A warning, a question. I leaned forward. He met me halfway. The kiss was hesitant at first. Careful. Like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. Then his other hand slid into my hair, and careful became urgent. I gasped against his mouth, and he swallowed the sound, pulling me closer until I was nearly in his lap, the gear shift digging into my hip, and I didn't care. The car stopped. We broke apart, breathing hard. Publio's eyes were dark, his lips parted, his carefully controlled, expression completely shattered. "We should," he started. "Yes," I said. Neither of us moved. Then he kissed me again, slower this time, deliberate, like he was memorizing the taste of me. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "This changes things," he whispered. "I know. Are you afraid?" I should have said yes, but what came out was, no. A lie. I was terrified, but not of him, of how much I wanted this, how much I wanted him. He helped me out of the car, his hand never leaving mine as we walked into the villa. At the staircase we paused. His room was west. Mine was east. "Good night, Margo," he said softly. "Good night." But his hand lingered in mine, and when he finally let go, I felt the loss like a physical ache. I climbed the stairs alone, my lips still burning, my heart racing. Everything had changed tonight, and there was no going back. The gunshot woke me at 4:17 a.m. For a moment I thought I'd dreamed it, a sharp crack that echoed through the villa like breaking stone. Then came the second shot, and the third. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs, shouting, men's voices urgent and overlapping, the sound of shattering glass from somewhere below. Then, automatic gunfire. A sound I'd only heard in movies, now ripping through the silence like tearing fabric. Someone was attacking the villa. I scrambled out of bed, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip my phone. No signal. The Wi-Fi was down. Another burst of gunfire, closer now. The door to my room flew open. I screamed. Luca stood in the doorway, gun drawn, his expression grim. Blood streaked across his jaw. Not his, I thought. Hoped. "Vieni," he barked. "Now. With me." "What's happening?" "Now, Mrs. Genovesi." He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the hallway. The lights were out except for emergency floods that cast everything in harsh red. Below, I could hear the chaos. Men shouting in Italian, boots on marble, the unmistakable sound of bodies hitting the floor. Luca dragged me down a corridor I'd never been in before, then through a hidden door I hadn't known existed, concealed behind a tapestry, a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. "Where are we?" "Wine cellar. Safest place in the house. Don Genovese's orders." He shoved a flashlight into my hands. "Stay down there. Lock the door from inside. Don't come out until I come for you. Where's Publio?" "Doing what he does." Luca's expression was hard. "Protecting what's his." He pushed me toward the stairs and disappeared. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, then stumbled down into the darkness. The wine cellar was exactly what it sounded like. Stone walls, racks of bottles, the smell of earth and age. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly. I found the lock, a heavy iron bolt, and threw it. Then I sank to the cold floor, my back against the door, and tried not to shake apart. Above, me. The villa was at war. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Time felt broken. The gunfire came in bursts, intense and terrifying, then silent, then erupting again. I heard someone screaming, then nothing. Footsteps directly overhead, running, then a crash, then silence. I pressed my hands over my ears and tried to breathe. This isn't real. This isn't happening. This is a nightmare. Then, quiet, true quiet. No gunfire, no shouting, just the sound of my own ragged breathing. I waited. Still nothing. Slowly, carefully, I stood and pressed my ear to the door. Voices, low, Italian. I couldn't make out the words. Then, footsteps on the stone stairs. I backed away from the door, looking around wildly for anything I could use as a weapon. "Margo." Publio's voice muffled through the wood. "It's me. Open the door." My hands shook as I threw the bolt. The door swung open. Publio stood there, backlit by the red emergency lighting, and he was covered in blood. It soaked his shirt, no longer white, but dark crimson. Spattered across his face, his neck, his hands. His knuckles were split and raw. He was holding a gun. I'd never seen him hold a gun before. "Are you hurt?" His voice was calm. Too calm. The voice of a man in complete control, even as he stood there painted in violence. I couldn't speak, could only stare. He stepped into the cellar, setting the gun on a wine rack with careful precision. Then he reached for me. I flinched. He froze, his hand suspended in the air between us. Something crossed his face. Pain, maybe. "The blood isn't mine," he said quietly. "Whose is it?" He didn't answer. "Publio." "Whose blood is that?" "Men who came here to kill you." The words hung in the air like smoke. "What?" "Verenzio sent them." His voice was flat, matter of fact. 8 men, armed. They came through the south garden while the house was sleeping. Their orders were to take you and use you as leverage against me. My legs felt weak. "But they didn't." "No." Something dark flickered in his eyes. "They didn't." "Because you—" I couldn't finish. Because I stopped them. He said it simply, like discussing the weather. Come, it's safe now. He turned and climbed the stairs. I followed on numb legs. The entrance hall looked like a massacre. Marble floors slick with blood, bullet holes in the frescoed walls, broken glass everywhere, chandeliers, windows, mirrors, and bodies. 3 of them being dragged toward the door by men in black. I couldn't see their faces. Didn't want to. My stomach lurched. Publio's men moved with mechanical efficiency, cleaning, removing evidence, already repairing what could be repaired. Like they'd done this before. Like this was normal. Francesca appeared from somewhere, her face pale but composed. She took one look at me and came forward. Kara, come, let's get you... I'm fine, I heard myself say. She looked at Publio. He nodded once. She disappeared. I turned slowly, taking in the destruction. The elegant, beautiful villa transformed into a war zone. You killed them. My voice sounded distant. Not like mine. Yes. All of them? The ones who made it inside. 4 more outside. He was watching me carefully. Luca is handling the rest. The rest? Bodies. Clean up. Police won't be a problem. Police won't be a problem. Of course they wouldn't. Because this was his world. A world where violence happened and disappeared like it had never existed. Where men died on marble floors and were erased by morning. I need you to look at me, Margo. I forced myself to meet his eyes. They were the same smoke gray I'd kissed in the car. The same eyes that had looked at me like I was something precious. But now I saw what was behind them. Not just protection. Predation. You moved like... I stopped. I saw you. Through the door crack when Luca was bringing me down. You moved like death. He finished quietly. I know. He stepped closer. I stepped back. He stopped immediately. This is who I am, he said. His voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. This is what I do. I told you fear was wise in this house. I told you my world was dangerous. You didn't tell me you were a killer. Yes, I did. His eyes held mine. You just didn't want to see it. And that was the horrible truth, wasn't it? I'd known. Some part of me had always known. The guards, the guns, the tattoo. The way people looked at him, not with respect, but with fear. Don Genovesi, not Lucien D'Amato. Publio Genovesi, head of the family, leader of the syndicate, Mafia boss. And I'd let myself pretend he was something else. I can't. My voice broke. I can't do this. Margo, you should have let me leave. Tears were streaming down my face now. You should have let me go back to New York and figure it out myself. Instead, you brought me into this. I brought you into safety. Safety? I gestured at the blood, the bodies, the shattered glass. This is safety? You're alive. His voice rose slightly, the first crack in his control. They came for you, Margo. Verenzio sent men to take you because he knows you matter to me. And if I hadn't been here, if my men hadn't been here, you'd be in his hands right now. Do you understand what that means? What he would have done to you? I was shaking. I want to leave. No. You can't keep me here. I can. He said it flatly. And I will. Until Verenzio is dealt with. Until the threat is neutralized. You're not safe out there, Margo. Not anymore. I'm not safe. Here. You are. He moved forward, and this time I had nowhere to go. My back hit the wall. You're the safest you've ever been. Because every man in this house would die before letting harm come to you. Because I would burn the world down before I let anyone take you from me. His hands came up, caging me against the wall, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. "I know you're scared," he said, his voice dropping. "I know this is more than you bargained for. But you're mine now, Margo. My wife, my responsibility, and I protect what's mine." "I'm not a possession." "No, you're not." His eyes searched mine. "You're so much more than that, and that's why I can't let you go." I closed my eyes, unable to look at him anymore, at the man who'd kissed me like I mattered, at the killer who'd just slaughtered 8 men without breaking a sweat. "Please," I whispered, "just leave me alone." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he stepped back. "Luca will be outside your door," he said quietly, "for your protection." "Or to keep me prisoner." His jaw tightened. "Whichever helps you sleep." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on blood-stained marble. I stood there shaking until Francesca came and guided me upstairs. She helped me into my room, brought me water, whispered soothing things in Italian I didn't understand. Then she left, and I was alone. I waited until the house was silent, until the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn. Then I opened my closet and pulled out the suitcase I'd arrived with. I packed quickly, quietly. Only what I'd brought with me, nothing he'd given me. Not the dresses, not the shoes, not the necklace. My father's compass went into my pocket. The knife Publio had given me stayed on the nightstand. I left it deliberately. A message. "I'm not part of your world." At 5:47 a.m., I opened my bedroom door. Luca was slumped in a chair, asleep, or pretending to be. I slipped past him, moving on silent feet through corridors I'd memorized, down the stairs, through the entrance hall, now cleaned but still smelling of copper and gunpowder, to the front door. My hand was on the handle when I heard his voice. "Running won't save you." I turned. Publio stood at the top of the stairs, still in his blood-stained clothes, looking like a ghost or a demon or something in between. "It might not save me," I said quietly, "but it'll save what's left of who I am." I opened the door and walked out into the dawn. Rome was supposed to be my sanctuary, a city of millions where a woman could disappear, where no one asked questions if you paid cash and kept your head down. I found a room in Trastevere, a cramped studio above a bakery, the kind of place tourists never found. The landlady took my money without asking for ID when I told her mine had been stolen. "Men trouble?" she'd asked in broken English, her eyes knowing. "Yes," I'd said. Not entirely a lie. That was 11 days ago. 11 days of looking over my shoulder, of jumping at shadows, of telling myself I'd made the right choice. I'd found work at a small architectural firm near Campo de Fiori. Nothing official, just drafting work for cash. The owner, an elderly man named Signor Russo, didn't ask questions either. He just looked at my portfolio sketches and nodded. "You have good hands," he'd said. "We can use good hands." So I drew. Floor plans for renovations, elevation studies for historic restorations, the kind of work that kept my mind busy and my hands moving, the kind of work that almost made me forget. Almost. But at night, in that cramped studio with sirens wailing in the distance, I couldn't stop seeing blood on marble, couldn't stop hearing the gunfire, couldn't stop feeling Publio's eyes on me as I walked out the door. Running won't save you. I'd find myself reaching for my phone to call him, then remembering I'd thrown the SIM card into the Tiber, remembering why I'd left. Bodies, blood, the cold efficiency with which he'd killed. I told myself I'd done the right thing, told myself every morning when I woke up, but I never quite believed it. The first time I noticed the car, I thought I was being paranoid. It was day 7, a black sedan, tinted windows, parked across from the firm. When I left for lunch, it was still there. When I came back an hour later, it was gone. Coincidence, I told myself. But the next day, there was a different car, dark blue, same tinted windows, and the man in the cafe who'd been reading the same newspaper for 2 hours, and the woman who'd walked past my building 3 times in an hour. I was being watched. The question was, by whom? Publio's men making sure I was safe? Or someone else? On day 9, I saw the newspaper. I'd stopped at a kiosk for an espresso when the headline caught my eye. Violenza, a Positano, scontro tra famiglie. Violence in Positano, clash between families. My hands trembled as I bought a copy. The article was vague. The Italian press knew better than to name names directly, but the details were there for anyone who knew how to read them. A disturbance at a private villa on the Amalfi Coast. 8 casualties, no arrests, police investigating but facing challenges due to limited cooperation from witnesses. One line made my blood run cold. Sources suggest the incident may be related to ongoing territorial disputes between regional business interests. Business interests, the Genovesi, the Verenzios, me. I left the newspaper on the counter and walked home quickly, my heart hammering. This was my fault. Men had died because Verenzio wanted to use me against Publio, and I'd thought running would make it stop. The attack came on day 11. I was walking home from work, taking my usual route through the narrow streets of Trastevere. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between the buildings. I'd just turned onto my street when I felt it, the prickling awareness of being followed. I walked faster. Footsteps behind me matched my pace. I turned down an alley, a shortcut I'd used before. Mistake. The alley was empty, quiet. The kind of quiet that meant people had learned not to look. Signorina. Skelley. A man's voice behind me, accented, amused. I spun around. 2 men blocked the entrance to the alley, both in dark clothes, both with the kind of faces that belonged to men who hurt people for money. "You are a difficult woman to find," the first one said, stepping closer. "But not impossible." I backed up. "I don't have any money. We don't want money." The second man smiled. "We want you to come with us, quietly. No, not a request." The first man pulled something from his jacket. Not a gun, a syringe. My blood turned to ice. I ran, made it maybe 10 feet before hands grabbed me from behind. A third man, I realized, had been waiting deeper in the alley. I screamed. A hand clamped over my mouth. An arm locked around my waist, lifting me off the ground. I thrashed, kicked, bit down hard on the hand covering my mouth. Someone swore. The grip loosened. I twisted free and ran again, and slammed directly into a 4th man. This one was bigger, stronger. He caught me easily, his hands like vices on my arms. "Basta!" he growled. Enough. The syringe was coming closer. I was going to disappear, going to wake up in some basement, used as bait to draw Publio out. Gunfire. A single shot, impossibly loud in the narrow alley. The man holding me jerked and fell, his grip releasing. I stumbled backward and hit the wall. More gunshots, controlled, precise. Not a spray of automatic fire, but carefully placed shots. The 2 men at the alley entrance fell. The one with the syringe dropped it and reached for his gun. Another shot. He crumpled. Silence. Then footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. From the shadows at the far end of the alley, Publio emerged. He was in a dark suit, immaculate except for the gun in his hand. 2 men flanked him, Luca and another I didn't recognize. But I only saw Publio. His face was a mask of cold fury. His eyes, those smoke-gray eyes I'd seen look at me with tenderness, were empty of everything except lethal purpose. He looked at the bodies, then at me. "Are you hurt?" I couldn't speak, could only shake my head. He moved forward, stepping over a corpse without looking at it, and stopped in front of me. Up close, I could see the rage vibrating beneath his control, the tension in his jaw, the way his free hand was clenched in a fist. "Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" His voice was soft, deadly. "How? I've known where you were since the moment you left." He gestured and Luca stepped forward, already on his phone. "Did you think I'd let you walk into the world unprotected? That I'd leave you to fend for yourself? You were watching me, every second of every day." He said it without apology. Good thing, too. The man with the syringe groaned. Not dead, I realized. Just wounded. Publio's attention shifted. He walked over, crouched beside the man, and pressed the gun to his temple. "Who sent you?" he asked in Italian. The man spat blood, said nothing. Publio cocked the gun. "Chi ti ha mandato?" "Vaffanculo!" The gunshot echoed through the alley. I flinched, closing my eyes. When I opened them, Publio was standing, wiping blood spatter from his face with a handkerchief like he'd just finished a business meeting. He turned back to me. "Let's go." "I'm not." "You are." He wasn't asking. "Now." Luca appeared at my side, his hand gentle but firm on my elbow. "Mrs. Genovesi, please." I let them guide me out of the alley, past the bodies, past the growing pool of blood spreading across cobblestones. A car was waiting, the black sedan I'd seen watching me. Of course. Publio opened the door. I climbed in. He slid in beside me, and the door closed, sealing us in silence. We drove in absolute quiet. Publio stared out the window, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming against his knee, the only sign of agitation. I stared at my hands. They were shaking. "You killed him," I finally whispered. "Yes." "In front of me." "Yes." He turned to look at me now. "I would have killed all of them in front of you if it meant keeping you safe. That's not... Leaving didn't free you, Margo." His voice was hard, final. "It only told my enemies where to find you. Without my men, without my protection. Verenzio's people have been hunting you for over a week. Today they found you. Because of you." My voice broke. "They want me because of you. They want you because you matter." He leaned closer, his eyes blazing. "Because when Verenzio saw us together, he realized what you are to me, and he decided you were a weakness he could exploit." "Then let me go." "I can't." The raw honesty in his voice stopped me. "Even if I wanted to, even if I could make myself walk away, it's too late. You're marked now. Verenzio knows your face, knows your name, knows you're the one way to hurt me." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "So what am I supposed to do? Live in a cage? Spend the rest of my life surrounded by guards and guns? You're supposed to trust that I will keep you alive." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his hand cupped my face. "You're supposed to let me protect you until this is over." "And when will it be over?" His thumb brushed away a tear. "When Verenzio is no longer a threat. Which means what it means." His eyes held mine. "I won't apologize for what I am, Margo, for what I do. But I will promise you this. As long as I'm breathing, no one will touch you. No one will take you. No one will hurt you." "You already hurt me." My voice was barely a whisper. "When you made me fall for a man who kills people." Something cracked in his expression. "Margo, I hate that I need you." The words spilled out, ugly and true. I hate that I can't stop thinking about you. I hate that I left and all I wanted was to go back. I hate that when I saw you in that alley, the first thing I felt was relief. His forehead dropped to mine. I know. I hate you. I know. His voice was rough, broken. But you're alive, and I'll take your hatred if it means keeping you that way. I was crying in earnest now, my body shaking with sobs I couldn't control. Publio pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me like a fortress. I've got you, he murmured into my hair. Tiho, sei al sicuro. I've got you. You're safe. And despite everything, despite the violence, the blood, the bodies left in the alley, I believed him. Because the terrible truth was this. I'd never felt safer than I did in the arms of the most dangerous man I'd ever known. When we finally pulled up to the villa, the sun was setting over the sea. Francesca was waiting at the door, her face drawn with worry. She pulled me into a fierce embrace the moment I stepped out of the car. "Stupida ragazza," she whispered. "Stupid girl. Don't ever do that again." Publio spoke quietly with Luca, giving orders I couldn't hear. Then he turned to me. "You need to rest. We'll talk tomorrow." "Publio." "Tomorrow, Margo." His voice was gentle but firm. "You've been through enough today." He walked away before I could respond. Francesca guided me upstairs, helped me shower, brought me tea I didn't drink. When she finally left, I lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling. My suitcase, the one I'd packed and left with, sat in the corner. Someone had brought it back. On my nightstand, next to my father's compass, was something new. The knife Publio had given me. The one I'd deliberately left behind. A note was tucked beneath it, written in strong, precise handwriting. "You may not want my world, but you're in it now. Learn to survive it. P." I picked up the knife, feeling its weight in my palm, and for the first time since I'd run, I didn't cry. I just held the blade and understood. Running was over. Now came the choice. Survive his world, or be destroyed by it. I woke to sunlight streaming through open windows and the sound of waves against the cliffs. For a moment I forgot where I was, forgot what had happened. Then I saw the knife on my nightstand, and everything came rushing back. The alley, the attack, Publio's face as he pulled the trigger. "I've got you." I sat up slowly, my body aching like I'd been hit by a car. Emotional exhaustion, I supposed, the kind that settles into your bones. A note was propped against the water carafe on my nightstand, different from the one that had come with the knife. Fresh. Written this morning. "When you're ready, come find me in the garden. P. I found him by the fountain." The villa's garden was a series of terraced levels that cascaded down toward the cliffs, ancient olive trees, lavender hedges, stone pathways worn smooth by centuries. At the lowest level, just before the land dropped away to the sea, was a fountain. Roman era, Francesca had told me once. Older than the villa itself. Publio sat on the fountain's edge, still in last night's clothes. Wrinkled now, his shirt untucked, sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted, human, in a way I'd rarely seen him. He didn't turn when I approached, though I knew he'd heard me. "You came," he said quietly. "You asked me to." "I wasn't sure you would." I sat on the opposite side of the fountain, keeping distance between us. The water trickled softly, filling the silence. "How long have you been out here?" I asked. "A few hours." He finally looked at me, and I saw the shadows under his eyes. "I don't sleep well after nights like that." "Because of what you did?" Because of what almost happened. His voice was rough. They were 20 seconds from taking you, Margo. 20 seconds from putting you in a car and disappearing you into a place I might never have found. I hugged my arms around myself. But you did find me. This time. He turned back to the sea. There won't always be a this time. For a long moment we sat in silence. Then, tell me about your family. He glanced at me, surprised. You said your world doesn't let you be good, I continued. That you tried. Tell me what that means. Tell me who you were before you became this. Publio was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he started speaking, his voice low and careful, like each word cost him something. My father died when I was 19. Heart attack at the dinner table. One moment he was laughing, the next he was gone. He paused. I inherited everything that night. The business, the territory, the enemies, the blood feuds that went back 3 generations. You were just a kid. I was the oldest son. There was no choice. He picked up a pebble, turning it over in his fingers. My uncle, Francesca's brother, tried to help. Tried to teach me how to navigate it all, but he was killed 6 months later. Car bomb meant for me. I drew in a sharp breath. After that, I learned fast. Had to. The pebble dropped into the fountain with a soft plop. I was good at it. Too good. By 25, I'd consolidated power, eliminated rivals, expanded operations. I became exactly what the family needed. Ruthless, calculating, feared. And what you didn't want to be, I said softly. His eyes met mine. No. So you tried to change it. 5 years ago, I started moving us legitimate. Real estate development. Shipping. Legal shipping. Import-export with actual licenses. He laughed bitterly. I thought if I could just transition slowly enough, keep the old guard happy while building something clean, I could transform us into a legitimate business empire. What happened? Other families saw it as weakness. They pushed into our territory, attacked our interests. I had to push back, had to prove we were still strong. He looked down at his hands, those hands that had held me gently and killed men with equal ease. Every time I tried to step toward the light, the violence pulled me back. Your brother, I said, Marco, the one my father saved. Publio nodded. He got out. Lives in London now, runs a tech company. Clean money, clean life. I made sure of it. Sent him away before the life could sink its teeth in too deep. He was the lucky one. He was the smart one. Publio's voice was heavy with something like grief. I'm the one who stayed because someone had to. Because if I walked away, everything my father built, good and bad, would tear itself apart. People who depend on us would suffer, and men worse than me would fill the vacuum. I moved closer, sitting beside him now instead of across. Our shoulders almost touched. When did you meet my father? 15 years ago. I was 20, scared, desperate. We needed safe houses, and someone recommended Joseph Skelley, said he was discreet, talented, wouldn't ask questions. Publio smiled slightly. Your father asked plenty of questions, just not the ones I expected. What did he ask? If anyone would get hurt in the buildings he designed, if they'd be used to harm innocents. Publio's voice softened. I told him the truth, that they were defensive positions only, places for my people to hide, not attack from. He looked me in the eye for a long time, then nodded and took the job. Sounds like him. We met 3 times during the builds. Each time, we'd have drinks after going over the plans. He'd tell me about his daughter, this brilliant girl who saw the world in structures and symmetry, who was going to build cathedrals someday. Publio looked at me. He showed me your photo once. You were maybe 12, holding up a model you'd built. So proud. My throat tightened. The last time I saw him, he made me promise something. Publio's voice grew quieter. He said, if anything ever happens to her, if she ever needs help and I'm not there, you watch over her. Promise me, Publio. I promised. I thought it was just talk. The kind of thing you say and never expect to matter. But it did matter. When I heard what happened to you, what your fiancé and friend had done, I had my people track you, found out you'd fled to Italy, found out you were alone, broke, desperate. He turned to face me fully. I could have just sent money, could have arranged a job, a place to stay. But I remembered the promise, and I thought, maybe this was how I finally repaid the debt. So you married me. My voice was barely a whisper, to fulfill a promise to a dead man. At first, he reached out slowly, his hand covering mine. At first, yes. It was duty, obligation, a way to honor a good man who'd helped me when I was drowning. And now? His thumb traced circles on my wrist, right over my pulse point. Now you're the first light I've known in years. The words hung in the air between us, raw and honest. Publio, I don't expect you to love me, he said quickly. I don't even expect you to forgive me for what I am. But I need you to understand. You're not just a debt anymore. You're not a promise I'm keeping or a responsibility I'm bearing. Then what am I? You're the reason I wake up thinking maybe I can still be the man your father believed I could be. His voice cracked slightly. You're the first person in a decade who looks at me and sees someone worth saving instead of someone to fear. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I can't be your redemption, I said. That's not fair to either of us. I know. He lifted his hand, wiping away a tear with his thumb. I'm not asking you to save me, Margo. I'm just asking you to stay. As what? Your kept wife? Your pretty possession? As my partner. The certainty in his voice surprised me. As someone who stands beside me, not behind me. Someone with her own voice, her own choices, her own life. I pulled back slightly. You say that now, but I mean it. He stood abruptly, and for a moment I thought he was walking away. Instead, he knelt. Publio Genovesi, the man who commanded respect with a glance, who made grown men tremble, who'd never bowed to anyone, knelt before me on the stone pathway. What are you? I'm asking you to stay, he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Not because I can protect you, not because you're safer here, not because of some promise to your father. He took my hands in his. Stay because you want to, because you choose this. Choose me. He paused. And if you can't, if you need to leave, I'll let you go. I'll make sure you're safe, set you up somewhere far from all of this, and I'll walk away. But please, Margo, choose to stay. I stared at him, this powerful, dangerous, complicated man kneeling before me like a supplicant. If I stay, I said slowly, things change. How? I'm not a prisoner, not a secret, not someone you make decisions for. I straightened, finding my strength. I want to work, build things, have a life that's mine, not just an extension of yours. Done. I want honesty. No more half-truths about what you do or where you go. Done. And I want time. My voice softened. Time to figure out who I am in this world. Time to decide if I can love a man who does what you do. He was quiet for a moment, then, I can give you time. I can give you honesty. I can give you freedom within the boundaries that keep you safe. He squeezed my hands gently. What I can't give you is a different life. This is who I am, Margo. I will always be this. I know. And you're still considering staying? I looked at him. Really looked. At the shadows under his eyes from a sleepless night spent worrying about me, at the carefully controlled expression that hid so much pain, at the hands that had killed and comforted in equal measure. I'm not considering, I said quietly. I'm choosing. His breath caught. Choosing what? To stay. The words felt like stepping off a cliff. Not because I have to. Not because I'm scared. But because when I left, all I wanted was to come back. Because you're right. You're a terrible, complicated, dangerous man. And somehow that doesn't change the fact that I stopped. The words too big to say yet. But Publio's expression transformed. Say it, he whispered. Please. I care about you. Not love. Not yet. But something. Against every bit of common sense I have, I care about you. He rose slowly, pulling me up with him, and cupped my face in both hands. That's enough, he murmured. That's more than I deserve. Probably. He smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine, and heartbreakingly young. We'll figure it out, he said. Together, as partners. As equals, I added. As equals, he agreed. Then he kissed me, soft and careful and full of promise. When we finally pulled apart, the sun was higher, the garden bright with morning light. Come on, he said, taking my hand. Francesca's probably waiting with breakfast and 1,000 questions. She's going to lecture me about running away. Undoubtedly. He smiled. But she'll be happy you're back. We all will. We walked up the garden path together, hand in hand, and for the first time since I'd arrived in Italy, I felt like I was walking toward something instead of running away. Not a cage, not a prison, but a choice. And maybe, eventually, a home. 6 months later. The model caught the afternoon light perfectly. I stepped back, studying the miniature from different angles, the way the proposed cultural center would sit against Naples' historic skyline, how the glass facade would reflect the bay, the way the interior courtyard would create a dialogue between old and new. It's beautiful, Signora Genovesi. I turned to find Marco standing in the doorway of my studio, Publio's younger brother visiting from London. He had the same smoke-gray eyes, but where Publio's held danger, Marco's held only warmth. You think so? I gestured to the plans spread across my drafting table. The preservation committee is worried it's too modern for the historical district. It's exactly modern enough. He moved closer, examining the elevations. You're not trying to replicate the past. You're honoring it while building toward the future. That's good architecture. That's what my father used to say. Then he'd be proud. Marco smiled. We all are. Especially Publio, though he'd never admit how much time he spends bragging about you to anyone who'll listen. I laughed. He does not. He absolutely does. Last week he cornered the mayor at a dinner and spent 20 minutes showing him photos of your designs on his phone. The mental image made me smile. Publio, feared Adon of the Genovesi family, scrolling through architectural renderings like a proud parent. Speaking of my brother, Marco said, checking his watch. Aren't you supposed to be getting ready? The gala starts in 2 hours. My stomach fluttered. Don't remind me. Margo, you're unveiling a major cultural project. The press will be there. The city's elite. This is your moment. That's what terrifies me. He squeezed my shoulder gently. Then it's a good thing you have a very protective husband who'll murder anyone who looks at you wrong. Marco, I'm kidding. He paused. Mostly. The Palazzo Reale was lit like a jewel box. I stood at the entrance, Publio's hand at the small of my back, a gesture so familiar now it felt like breathing. He was in a black tuxedo, his hair swept back, every inch the powerful man he was. But when he looked at me, his eyes were soft. "Ready?" he murmured. I was wearing emerald green tonight, a gown Francesca had insisted on, with a neckline that made me feel elegant and dangerous. My father's compass hung from a delicate chain around my neck, not the original brass piece, but a custom pendant Publio had commissioned, encasing the compass in crystal and gold. "Ready," I said. We entered together. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, the way it always did when Publio Genovesi arrived. But this time, the whispers that followed weren't about him. They were about me. "That's her. The architect. The Genovesi Cultural Center. Did you see the renderings? They say she's transforming the entire waterfront district." Publio leaned close. "They're watching you, not me. How does it feel?" "Terrifying." "Good. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." The evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. I presented the project to the mayor, the preservation board, the donors who'd made it possible. Publio stood back, letting me shine, only stepping in when someone needed reminding that the Genovesi family fully supported my vision. A journalist from La Repubblica cornered me by the champagne. "Mrs. Genovesi, they're calling you the architect who tamed the Lion of Naples." "How do you respond?" I glanced at Publio across the room. He was speaking with the city planner, but his eyes found mine immediately, always tracking, always aware. "I didn't tame anything," I said carefully. "I just reminded him that even lions need something worth protecting beyond territory." The journalist scribbled notes. "And your project? Some are saying it's the beginning of a new era for the Genovesi family, a move toward legitimacy." "The project is about preserving Naples' cultural heritage while creating space for contemporary art," I said diplomatically. "What it means for my husband's family, you'd have to ask him." But I knew what it meant. Every legitimate venture I built gave Publio more cover to transition the family business away from the shadows. Every public success I had made his efforts to go clean more credible. We were partners, in every sense. The commotion started near the entrance. I felt Publio tense before I saw why. Verenzio had arrived. He looked different than I remembered, older, diminished. The predatory confidence was gone, replaced by something more careful, more humble. He approached slowly, hands visible and empty. Luca and 2 other guards moved to intercept, but Publio raised a hand. "Let him come." Verenzio stopped a respectful distance away. "Don Genovesi, Signora, Genovesi." He nodded to each of us. "I hope I'm not intruding." "That depends on why you're here." Publio's voice was deadly calm. "To offer peace." Verenzio's eyes met Publio's steadily. "The families have been at war too long. Too many have died. I'm proposing a formal truce. Recognized territories. No interference." "You tried to take my wife," Publio said softly. "You sent men to abduct her. And you think I'll accept your handshake? I was wrong." Verenzio said it simply. "I underestimated what she meant to you. Underestimated her entirely." He glanced at me. "You have my apology, Signora. What was done was dishonorable." I said nothing. Apologies didn't erase the alley, the syringe, the terror. But Publio's hand tightened on my waist, not in anger, but in question. "Your choice," the gesture said. "I'll follow your lead." I took a breath. "Your men tried to drug me and use me as bait. An apology doesn't fix that." "No," Verenzio agreed. "It doesn't. But a truce means you'll never have to fear that again. My word on it." Publio's jaw worked. I could feel the violence coiled in him, the desire to refuse, to make Verenzio pay in blood. But then his eyes found mine, and something in his expression softened. "We'll consider your offer," Publio said finally. "My lawyer will contact yours. If you honor the terms, we'll have peace." Verenzio looked genuinely surprised. "Thank you. Done." "Don't thank me. Thank my wife." Publio's voice was quiet but clear. "She's the only reason you're walking out of here." Verenzio nodded once and left. The room slowly returned to its normal hum. Publio pulled me close, his lips against my ear. "You know I could have ended him." "I know. But you didn't want that. I wanted you to choose peace." I looked up at him. "For once, I wanted you to choose the light." His smile was soft, grateful. "For you, Kara, I'll always choose the light." We left the gala early, letting the mayor and the press celebrate the project without us. The villa was quiet when we returned. Francesca had retired for the evening, the guards discreet shadows. Publio took my hand and led me to the garden. Our garden. The fountain where he'd knelt and asked me to choose him. The terraced paths where we'd walked 1,000 times, learning each other. The sea beyond was calm tonight, reflecting moonlight like scattered diamonds. We stood at the edge, where land met sky met water. "You were magnificent tonight," Publio said quietly. "The project isn't built yet." "I don't mean the project." He turned me to face him. "I mean you. The way you stood in that room and commanded respect. The way you handled Verenzio with more grace than he deserved. The way you've built a life here that's entirely yours." "Our life?" I corrected. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." "Yes, you could have." His conviction was absolute. "You would have found another way, built something else. You're brilliant and stubborn and stronger than you give yourself credit for." I leaned into him, resting my head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear. "You built a world on secrets," I murmured. "But somehow you gave me a place in it, made room for me." "Every brick you lay here will be yours," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every building, every dream, every piece of this empire we're building together, it's as much yours as mine." He pulled back slightly, reaching into his pocket. "I have something for you." He handed me a worn leather case. Inside was my father's compass, the original. The brass tarnished, the glass cracked, exactly as I remembered. "You already gave me this," I said, touching the crystal pendant at my neck. "That was a copy, a symbol." He nodded to the compass in my hands. "This is the real thing, the one your father carried for 40 years, the one he used when he designed those safe houses." My throat tightened. "How did you—" "I've had it the whole time. I just wasn't sure when to give it to you, when you'd be ready." He covered my hands with his. "You're ready now." "Ready for what?" "To build something that lasts. To create a future instead of just surviving the present." His eyes held mine. To design our life together, not just live the one we fell into. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I love you." The words came easily now. I'd said them before, but they still felt new, important. "I love you, Publio. Even though you're impossible and dangerous, and you drive me crazy." He kissed me, swallowing the rest of my words. When we pulled apart, he was smiling. "I love you too, more than I have words for." We stood there, wrapped in each other, the sea breeze soft against our skin. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I need to sketch something. Now? Right now?" He laughed and led me back to the villa, to my studio, the one he'd built for me in the East Wing, with perfect northern light and space for all my dreams. I pulled out fresh paper and charcoal. Publio settled into the leather chair by the window, content to watch. I drew. Not the cultural center, not another building. I drew the villa as it could be. The gardens expanded. A new wing for children, maybe someday. A proper library, guest houses, space for family, for life, for growth, a future. "What are you designing?" Publio asked softly. "Our horizon," I said. "Something new, for both of us." He came to stand behind me, his hands on my shoulders, and together we looked at the sketch taking shape. A home. Not a fortress, not a prison, but a place where light and shadow could exist together, where love could flourish despite the darkness, where a woman who'd been betrayed could learn to trust again, and where a man born into violence could choose peace. I set down the charcoal and turned in his arms. "We're going to build something beautiful," I said. "We already are, amore mio." He kissed my forehead. "We already are." And in that moment, surrounded by sketches of what could be, I knew we would. Whatever came next, danger or peace, triumph or struggle, we'd face it together, as partners, as equals, as two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. The compass sat on my drafting table, its needle pointing true north, toward home, toward us, toward forever.